So there I was, flying through space, right? And it occurred to me that if I wanted my game to stand out, I needed to lean really hard into that space theme that I've been trying for. Right now, I feel like my game is fun, but not really unique. So how do I stand out in this genre which is overflowing with cool and creative games? To answer that, let me take you back to my childhood. When I was younger, I loved playing all manner of games on my Nintendo Wii, from Super Smash Bros. Brawl to Twilight Princess to Super Mario Galaxy, and it's that last one that I want to focus on today. When you think of the Mario Galaxy games, the first thing that comes to mind is probably one of two things. Either the kick-ass soundtrack or the fantastic 3D planet bodies which inhabit the game world. And we'll come back to the soundtrack in a later devlog, so for now, let's take a look at the planet physics. We all remember walking around that first planet in the Good Egg Galaxy, a first real introduction into the crazy mind-bending adventure which awaited us. Well, I really wanted to bring that feeling of awe into my platform fighter. I want players to feel as though they are in space while battling each other. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, just how is any of this relevant to the platform fighter that I've been making? It's not like it's set on a bunch of mini planets, each of which you can walk all the way around, and together they all act as a mini 2D gravity simulation. But what if they did? What if instead of just the classic Super Smash Bros.-esque platforms, which are perfectly flat with gravity that pulls straight down all the time, there was a platform fighter with platforms that utilize a simple planet body simulation, where the fighters are pulled towards the center of the nearest planet, where the physics simulation takes the center stage, allowing for even more chaotic battles? Well, forget about imagining, how about I just show you? The first step to creating these sick-ass planet stages was the physics. See, with the existing game modes, the gravity calculation was really easy. It's simply a constant downwards force applied to the fighters. It's so simple, in fact, that the rigid body components, which allow for each of the fighters to have forces applied to them, has a built-in gravity function which I can just adjust as needed. But the planet gravity calculation? That's not nearly as simple. Well, it kinda was. It's a little weird. It's simple in concept. All I needed to do was find the distance and direction from each fighter to the nearest planet and then apply a force in that direction to pull them to the planet. The hard part is really figuring out how to rotate the fighters so their feet touch the ground and they don't just float around. Fortunately for me, I had already done something similar to this a while ago in a 3D planet gravity simulator that I made, so I was able to steal some of my code from that project and modify it to work in 2D. Once the player was properly pulled towards the planet, there was the issue of moving them nicely around it. See, the problem I had was that if the fighters move too fast or gravity is too low, then they won't really walk along the surface so much as they'll orbit around the planet. And essentially what I had to do to fix this was carefully adjust each fighter's move speed and gravity till the game still felt fast and fun, but the fighters weren't floating off the planet simply by moving. This problem was just made worse by the fact that for some strange reason, the movement physics work differently between the editor and the actual builds of the game. This is something I've still not quite figured out yet, so my temporary workdown is just balance the movement for the builds and not the editor. This means it kinda sucks to play the game in the editor, but no one's gonna be playing it there anyway, so it just has to work for the builds. I think my favorite part about this new game mode is how deceptively simple the underlying physics are. The calculation for how players should move is simple enough. Essentially, I'm just finding the tangent line of the player's position on the planet body every frame, and then moving the player along that line. This, of course, means that trying to make the movement feel exactly the same as the classic mode's movement is very difficult, since both the gravity and actual movement forces are calculated differently between the two game modes. The hardest part is still rotating the player so that they stand properly on the planet, but even this wasn't too difficult since I was able to reuse the code again from the 3D planet sim. But even so, switching the rotation into 2D was shockingly difficult because I do not understand how the fuck multiplying by quaternions work. They confuse me, I don't understand what they do or how to make them work in the ways they want. The only reason I've ever managed to utilize them before is because Stack Overflow is the greatest website in the history of the goddamn universe. And once again, Stack Overflow is the only reason I managed to figure it out this time. Fuck! But of course, the player movement isn't the only physics-based system which is present in the game. When I created the new game mode, I'd forgotten all about the projectile system that Astro uses for his ranged attacks. Because of this little oversight, when I first tested the new planet game mode, the projectiles demonstrated this amusing bug where they would only fly straight sideways relative to the camera. While this was funny, it wasn't realistic or fun, so I had to fix it. And fixing this was genuinely harder than making the entire planet movement system. Over the course of about 6 hours, spread across 2 days, I made an entire new projectile system which takes into account planet gravity, so I can now have projectiles be affected by the planet bodies. This means that in the planet game mode, projectiles will bend around the planets. This change immediately improved the fun factor of playing Astro since it was now much easier to hit enemies with your projectiles, and they went in the directions you expected them to. Of course, this system still isn't perfect. A great example of this is that the projectiles, which move straight up, don't quite function due to the way I'm calculating the tangent line every frame. My current workaround for this issue is to just ignore it and not have any projectiles that go straight up. And eventually I will have to address this and create an actual long-term solution, but for now it's best to just move on to the more pressing matters. What good is having a new game mode if you don't have any way of returning to the menus whenever you want? Well, no good, which is why I added a pause menu to both existing game modes. This was a simple enough addition. Once again, I basically just copied my pause system from Euclid Valley. Buy on Steam, please? And adapted it to work with the controller inputs. Once pausing was set up, I decided to take a break from adding new features and spend some time fixing the numerous small bugs and balancing issues which have been popping up for a few weeks. One of the biggest changes involved adjusting the movement and gravity of the classic mode to closer match that of the new planet mode, because it turns out that the new planet mode moves considerably faster than the classic mode, and instead of slowing down the movement on the planet, I decided to be more fun to speed up the movement in the classic games. Once my small list of bugs had been fixed, I moved on to another playtest. See, now that I've started playtesting, I really want to try and do at least one per month in order to be continuously adding features which are actually desired by potential players. This second playtest went much better than the first. The only real issues we ran into while playing were small ones that I already knew about but just didn't have time to fix yet. Of course, the feedback I received from this playtest was extremely helpful and definitely will lead to much more improvements to my game. The biggest piece of feedback I got was actually related to the new planet mode, which is, quote, the best part of the game and, quote, the worst part of the game. Essentially, this mode is really fun, but the controls are somewhat confusing, and every major bug that I've discovered so far is related to that mode, which makes sense because I implemented this mode super quickly. But the feedback's not all about people's favorite and least favorite parts of the game. It's also incredibly important to me that I know what minor changes people think would improve the game. For example, one of the most common things that I hear is that Astro low-key sucks ass compared to Radweld. Oh yeah, by the way, we decided to call the teleporting character Radweld. Maybe in an upcoming devlog you may see some of the concept art for her. But anyway, my point is, she's too good, but instead of nerfing her, I think I will instead buff Astro to try and match Radweld's strength. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that I spent a good amount of time designing the planet stages, which I've been showing in the footage throughout this video. Turns out, it's much harder to create a stage whose main platforms are planets because when laying it out, I need to ensure that it's possible to reach every planet and that you won't get trapped on one planet due to its gravity being too high and overpowering the gravity of every other planet body. I kept running into that issue, which is why I only have a few planet stages currently, but my plan moving forwards is to spend some time creating as many stages for both game modes as I can with the amount of art assets that I have right now. One interesting thing that I did notice when I started designing the planet stages was a bias I had towards placing things on the, quote, top of the maps. Forcing myself to think in terms of all the way around the planet actually allows me to create more interesting maps because they're fun to fight around on their entire circumference. And that's kind of all I've done since the last devlog. The progress between these two is a bit smaller since I spent most of the time implementing the new game mode and fixing the minor issues that came related to that. I think going forward, having two game modes will really benefit how well my game stands out, since as far as I can tell, the planet body platform genre is strangely unsaturated. As of right now, my next steps will involve adding more stages for both game modes, implementing the extras menu. This includes some form of tutorial as well as info about each fighter and a training mode of sorts. So, thanks for watching, but I have a mission to return to now, so good luck in all your future endeavors.